What's going on, everyone? Connor here with Caliber Whips, and today in this video I'm going to be showing you my current method for building a nylon bullwhip. This is my professional level method that I'm going to be showing you guys. This is going to be part one, so I'm breaking up into two parts just to make it a bit easier. So I thought I'd also mention that this whip and a few others like it are for sale on my eBay shop, so do check that out if you're interested. Also, I'm not going to be uploading as much onto YouTube as I used to in the past, so there's going to be some content here and there, but a lot of content that I'll be uploading is going to be on Instagram. That's the only platform that I'm the most active on. So I'll put a link for that if you guys are interested in following me on Instagram. And finally, I'm going to address this now rather than later, and that is, this right here is my current method for making a nylon bullwhip. There are a lot of opinionated whip makers out there that feel that they need to give their 2 cents, and I'm all for hearing it, but do keep in mind that at this point, I do know what I'm doing. So if you feel that, oh, don't do this, or you should do that instead, I've heard it probably a bajillion times. I'm well aware of what I'm doing, so if you want to give an idea, I'm more than happy to hear it, but otherwise, I don't really care. So with that being said, let's get started on how to make a nylon bullwhip. All right, so to construct the core, all you're going to need are these materials right here. You're going to need an 11-inch section of 1/4-inch steel rod. And the thing that I do with the tip of the rod is I grind it down to a nice dome instead of leaving a sharp, jagged edge after it's cut. So I'll just grind it down like this and I'll be good to go. You're also going to need a special type of sinker cord. This is the bag for it right here. It's called Tough Line sinker cord. Now I get the 1/4-inch because the 1/4-inch cord, it fits over the rod quite nicely. So I always make sure to get the 1/4-inch cord. You're going to need 2 feet of that, 11 inches of steel rod, and then you're going to need hockey tape. The brand that I use for hockey tape is called Jaybird in Maize. It's made in the USA and it's completely fabric, and I really like it a lot. Now, wax does not pass through this, so I only use it in the core and maybe the first belly on some of my whips. I'm not sure if I use it on this one. I don't think I do. You're also going to need BBs. It doesn't matter what type of BBs you get, if it's zinc plated or copper plated, as long as they're basically standard BBs. If you don't have BBs, you can use pretty much any type of, you can use like lead shot you get from shotgun shells. If you don't have that, you can just skip the weight altogether. You don't really need it. It just helps to transition the weight from the metal handle into the thong of the whip. That's the only reason why we have the weight here. And then last but not least, you're going to need bi-directional monofilament tape. Now this stuff is really bizarre. I got it off of Amazon. Let's see, this stuff right there. I believe it's called bi-directional monofilament tape because it has, if you notice right there on my finger, you can see it has lines of fiberglass going horizontal and vertical. So this is the stuff that I like to use. It's really good because it's super stiff and it doesn't break down at all. So I really like it. So to get started, what we're going to do is take our steel rod here, take our sinker cord, and we're going to fit the sinker cord over the steel rod. Then we're going to take a cigar lighter. I prefer cigar lighter. You can use any type of lighter, but I prefer using this because the flame is much more controlled and it doesn't get blown out by any wind. So I'm just going to melt that all the way around, just like this. Now we have a nice little tube that we got to work with. Now, before we do anything else, we're going to take the other side and do the exact same thing, but a little bit more gentle because we're going to feed BBs in through this side. So we're just basically going to basically do that, make a little funnel for the BBs to go in. And now what we're going to do is take super glue. It can be liquid super glue, it can be gel super glue. It doesn't really matter as long as you know how to control it. I don't really like using liquid, but I ran out of my preferred super glue, so we're going to have to make do. Just like that. And then we're going to quickly fit that over. Just like that. And now, while the super glue is still wet, we're going to take like 2 or 3 BBs here and feed that over into the steel rod. So we're going to set that on the side so the glue doesn't touch the table. Got a couple of BBs right here in the cord, and we're going to bring it over to the steel rod because there's still glue on the steel rod, and we're going to knead it together like that. There we go. And now what we're going to do is fill it up with some more BBs. Until we get 6 inches of BBs. All right, so we have 6 inches filled up right here. And what we're going to do is take our cigar lighter and we're going to burn the tip of it just barely. The purpose of this is to collapse the cord and prevent the BBs from escaping further down the length of this cord. So just barely, and we're good to go. And that's pretty much it. The BBs are not going to escape. What I'm probably going to do is burn the BBs just a smidgen. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that. And what we're going to do is take it over to our bench vise right here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is take our hockey tape. We're going to start, let me move the camera down here. Here we go. All right, so what we're going to do is take our hockey tape. We're going to start just like an inch or 2 past these BBs. And we're going to wrap it all the way down to the tip of the metal rod. So here's where the BBs end. You guys can see that. We're going to take our hockey tape and put it right there, just past it. And we're going to start spiraling it down. Now the main purpose of this is to put some grip on the steel rod and on the cord to keep the parachute cord from slipping off or slipping around as we're going to plait the first belly. Okay, so there we go. Then we're going to take our cutters right here. Just cut the little tail right off the end. Now you can use cutters or a razor tool. It doesn't really matter as long as you cut it, because I get a lot of questions regarding certain methods that I use, which is why I'm explaining every little thing I'm doing. So now that we have that, what we're going to do now is take our bi-directional monofilament tape right here. Now I have this little piece of leather on here as a pull tab, because if any of you guys have worked with tape, you know that if the tape falls over on itself, it's a nightmare to get it undone. Now this stuff is insanely strong and extremely adhesive, so without this tab and it folds over, it's an absolute nightmare to try to pull off. So I've had this leather tab for years and I use it all the time to keep my tape from sticking to itself. Okay, so the end of the BBs is here. We're going to go just literally like an inch or 75% up. So basically subtract 1/4 of this length right there. And we're only going to take it to where the metal rod ends, about like an inch past that, so to about here, as you guys can see. And the purpose of this tape is to keep the core nice and strong. Because one of the problems that happens, at least it happened with me when I first started whip making, was I thought a really loose transition was good, because I liked the way a whip felt when the transition was nice and loose. But over time, the core started to kind of punch through, and that was not good at all. So now what we're going to do is take another piece, and we're going to go back up the length of the whip. We're going to cut that off. As you guys can see, it's already fairly stiff. Now we're going to take one last piece of tape put that pull tab back on it. And now right where the metal rod begins, where the metal rod ends and the actual whip begins, we're going to put one last piece of tape, a couple of inches long, right smack dab on that transition, just to reinforce this area quite a bit. And now that pretty much does it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to roll this. Okay, so rolling the whip itself is actually not that hard. I take two really old cutting boards, preferably the, I don't know what this material is, but it's kind of like a rubbery substance. It's got a really good grip, so it keeps the whip from just sliding. As opposed to like this wood floor right here, the whip will just kind of slide as opposed to roll. So we're going to take this right here and just kind of knead it like a Play-Doh snake, like you did in kindergarten. Now the purpose of rolling a whip is to distribute the tension that we have on it, because if you notice, since we spiral it, we have a lot of tension because we're not perfect at wrapping things or braiding things. So itty bitty parts are going to be more stiff or more tense than others. So the purpose of rolling it is to kind of take that tension and kind of distribute it through the length of the whip, just to kind of keep things even and keep it nice for when we attach other bellies and when we have the finished product. So rolling a whip, in my opinion, is absolutely paramount. You can't skip this step. There's no excuse not to roll a whip, so if you're making a whip, you have to roll it. Okay, so for the first belly, we're going to need two 9-foot sections, one 6.5-foot section, and one 5.5-foot section. Now, the way that I prefer mounting strands onto a whip is taking the halfway point, basically taking the two ends together and just going up until they meet about right there. This is the halfway point. I'll dab a little bit of super glue on here, put it on, and then mount it with my hemostats. Now, for those of you who don't know what hemostats are, they are a very important tool for whip making. They're good for holding strands down and making crackers. I have a video on how to make crackers. I'll put a link for that video in the description down below. But I would highly, if you're into whip making, get some hemostats. They're a paramount tool that you need to have. But for this 5.5-foot section and for the 6.5-foot section, I'm actually going to stagger it about 5 inches like this. The purpose of this is because some whip makers prefer dropping 2 strands at a time. I prefer dropping 1 strand at a time, particularly in bellies, because it kind of makes the taper a bit smoother. So that's just what I prefer doing. So I'm going to take this right here and then find the halfway point. It's not the true halfway point because it is staggered. And what I'm going to do is take some of my super glue here, dab just a little bit on, and then secure it with my hemostats. Now I'm going to tell you guys something while this dries. I'm going to tell you guys something real quick about strand lengths, and that is professional whip makers, at least not me, I can't speak for every professional whip maker, but I use strand lengths to minimize waste. I don't go by strand lengths exclusively. What I mean by this is a lot of people ask me what strand lengths are for whips. They're like, hey, what are the strand lengths for this? What are the strand lengths for that? And I tell them, well, here are the strand lengths that I would use, but the way you make your whip will be different. The purpose of strand lengths is to just have enough length there to drop it ourselves. And when you've been making whips for a long enough time, you get what I call a plaiter's sense. Basically, you plait the whip and you kind of feel that, okay, I think the strand needs to be dropped, and you drop it. Because you can really tell if a whip is made by an amateur by the way the strands are, if the way it's braided, because you can tell like, okay, that's too many strands for that diameter of whip, or that's too little. Like you can tell that they're really working to make sure those strands cover everything when they really needed to add like 3 or 4 more strands. The purpose of strand lengths is to minimize waste. It is not something that I use exclusively. Like I could literally have like a foot of strand left, but if I feel that this strand needs to be dropped, I will drop it. So it's really bizarre, but you know, anyone who's been making whips for a long enough time, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're brand new to whip making, this feeling will come to you, and don't worry about it. Okay, so the way that I prefer to braid, when I get the strands ready to go is I'll take the first strand on the very bottom. So let me grab something to point to. Here we go. So I take the furthest back strand down below. So it's basically, it's under this guy right here. It's this guy. So I usually take the furthest back and I start plaiting. Now to plait, I usually, if you have an even number of strands on both sides, so for example we have four strands on each side, this is called an 8 plait because we technically have 8 strands here. If you count it, we have 8. Even though we cut 4 pieces of cord, this is technically 8 strands. This is an 8 plait. So we're going to take this strand right here, we're going to go over here on this side, we're going to go under 2, over 2. That's the way that I prefer doing it. Now technically, we're actually plaiting backwards. A lot of people prefer plaiting the other way, but what's going to happen is I prefer plaiting backwards for the handle, and then when the handle's mostly done, I change it around and then plait forward down the thong of the whip. But that's just me. So we went under 2, over 2, and we're going to go under 2, over 2, but you want to make sure that none of these strands start switching places on you. So these 2 strands kind of go together, so we're going to bring them forward, and then the strand back here, we're going to go under 2, over 2. Now this is really hard to get at first, so you guys are going to have to really be patient with this. If you guys have been plaiting before, don't sweat this part, just start plaiting away. But if you're brand new to whip making, this can be really intimidating. So we have 4 strands on this side, go under 2, over 2, just like that. And the biggest mistake that I made when I first started whip making was not keeping my strands in line. So for example, I would go, under 2, over 2 on this side, and then on like the other side, I'll literally skip a strand and go like under 3, over 1, and then do the same thing, under 2, over 2, and then under 2, over 2 on the other side. Like I'd literally be all over the place, and it does not work at all. The whip looks trashy, and it does not look clean at all. So we're basically going under 2, over 2 until the strand gets short or until I feel that it needs to be dropped. I'll generally drop the first strand though after the BBs. So I'm going to keep on plaiting until I'm ready to drop a strand. And I'll show you guys how I drop strands on bellies, because dropping a strand on a belly is different than dropping a strand on the overlay. So to drop a strand on a belly, what I like to do is I just abandon the strand outright. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep on plaiting. So here's where the BBs end, right here. And I'm going to keep on plaiting until I feel that the smallest strand needs to be dropped. So here's the strand that we're dropping right here. It's the smallest one. Bring it around. Again, under 2, over 2 that we've been doing this whole time. And now, as of right now, he does not exist. We are literally going to keep on plaiting right over him, and I'll show you what that looks like as I'm plaiting. For this, what I'm going to do, because since we're going from 4 strands to 3, I'm actually going to go under 3, over 1. And the purpose of this is to kind of help it come out a lot smoother. But now we're going under 2, over 1. So we're going under 2, over 2 on this side. We're going under 2, over 1 on this side. Because we weren't doing that before. We were going under 1, over 2, and you need to switch that over. Okay, do you guys see that? Okay, we're going to take our hemostats now and clamp that shut. And now we're going to take this strand that's kind of sitting all by himself. We're going to pull it nice and tight. We're not going to like pull it as tight as humanly possible, but we are going to pull it nice and snug. Then we're going to take our snippers and cut off literally just enough where we have an itty bitty tab kind of hanging off, like literally like 2 or 3 millimeters. The purpose of this now is to melt it. There we go, just like that. And now it is completely flush with the whip. You guys see that? That is what we're looking for. in my opinion, this is the best way to drop strands on a belly. And now what we're going to do is we're going to keep on doing this method, but we're going to drop strands where needed until we get to the 18-inch mark on the thong of the whip. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to measure. I'm not going to include the length of the handle here. So this handle length will not be included. I'm going to measure 18 inches from the base of the thong all the way to where the cord ends. So this right here is 18 inches. I'm going to take this little white marker here and just mark that. Now the purpose of this, the reason why I have 18 inches marked down is because I want to keep where the bellies end, I want to keep that consistent every time I make a whip. So real quick, so I can show you guys real quick. So here's the handle. We are not including that in the measurement of 18 inches. So right there, from here all the way down to right there, this white smudge, that is 18 inches. So from there to there. And we're going to drop, well, not drop the strands, but we're going to plait and drop the last strands until we get to a 4 plait on this white dot that I've drawn on here. And I'll show you guys what that looks like as I get down to there. But again, the reason why this is important is because I strive to keep the bellies or the whips consistent. So making the bellies consistent helps to keep the whips consistent. Because if a belly, ends 6 inches apart from each other as I make whips, if whip 1 has bellies that end like 6 inches sooner before whip 2, then whip 1 is going to be drastically different and perform drastically different than whip 2. So keeping whip 1 and whip 2 the same consistency is a really big help. So ensuring that the whips are consistent, I strive to make sure the bellies end at about the exact same mark. So that's just my little tidbit. Okay, so I plaited up to the point where that white dot was that I drew on the sinker cord, and I took some of this nylon bonded thread here and I just tied it around the plaiting, and then I cut it every 3 inches. So this is 3 inches long, this is 6 inches long, this is 9 inches long, and then this is a foot. Now the purpose of this is to just help it taper better as I plait over it. So that's pretty much the reason why I did that. And now what we're going to do is give this a roll, and then after it's rolled, we're going to attach the new strands onto the base of the handle. Alright, so what I've gone ahead and done was plait quite a bit all the way up the whip. So as you guys can see, I've done most of the handle here, and I'm already onto the thong of the whip. Now there are a couple things I wanted to quickly mention to you. The first was that all of the cord that is used to make this whip is gutted. I don't know if I've mentioned that already, but all of the cord is gutted, meaning I've taken out all of the inner strands of the cord. I've gotten quite a few questions. You'd be shocked how many I get asking if the cord is gutted. And yes, I'm going to say it now. All of the cord used in this whip is gutted. So just thought I'd bring that up to you guys. Also, you may notice this little red thing here on the whip. This is what I have as a marker that marks the 1 foot line from when the thong of the whip begins. So where the handle ends and the whip begins, 1 foot is this. And the purpose of this is to kind of help me mentally keep track of how far along the whip I am, because I'll show you guys right now here on one of my sheets. You guys can see that when I get to 8 plait on the overlay, I actually have a specific length of the whip that a strand is dropped. And don't worry, I'll explain what all this is later on, but I do this just to mentally keep track, because for this whip, we're actually going to stop it at the 32-inch mark. So this is the 12-inch mark, and the overall whip will end at the 32-inch mark. So basically, to attach the strands, I pretty much did the exact same thing. I glued it all to the end of the whip and started plaiting over itself. So for this particular plait, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a 10 plait. It's so for usually odd numbered plats, what I'll do is I'll go under the extra strand and then go over an even number of strands. So for example, the 10 plat right here, it's under 3 over 2. And that's generally what I do for odd numbered plats. The extra strand or the odd number strand will be on top, and then the lower number of strands or the even number of strands would be on the bottom. So you guys would see here, under 3 over 2. That's generally what I do when I make a whip. So what I'm going to do is keep on plaiting until I feel that the braiding is getting a bit tight and the strand needs to be abandoned, i.e. dropped, for this particular belly. And I'm going to keep going down. And another thing, I don't know if I did it in the last video, but basically that piece of sinker cord, we actually cut it right there when it ends, when the belly ends. So we don't have it kind of dangling a few inches up here. We actually cut it. I usually let a centimeter hang off and then I snip it, but we cut it right when it ends. So we have these strands free to do their thing. It's not really impeded, especially this bottom part. It's not going to be impeded by this core strand. So just thought I'd bring that up. So you want to end the belly at 32 inches. Just thought I'd make that clear because some people are going to wonder, where do you stop on the whip? 32 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep on plaiting until I get to the 32-inch mark. And I'll see you guys there when I get there. Okay, so I just finished braiding the whip and I tied it off with some bonded nylon thread here at the 32-inch mark. And I'm not going to cut off and stagger these strands here like I did with the first belly, because let me show you guys real quick. It's going to come into play later with these strands right here. I'll explain what that little chart looks like later on in the next video, because that is significant. But I thought I'd show you guys just real fast. You guys may notice that some of the strands are super long here because I haven't gotten around to cutting them yet. Like this strand right here is about 1 foot long. And I wanted to drive home the point that strand lengths are really used to minimize waste instead of as a strict guideline for dropping strands. Because if I had waited until these strands had gotten super short to drop them, I probably would have already ended up at the end of the whip and still had some other strands left to drop. So this is where that platter sense comes in, because you really need to kind of figure out, well, I think that the strands need to be dropped here, so that's exactly what I did. As I said, that comes with experience. You can't really nail it on the first try. So I'm just going to let you guys know that if this is your first time attempting a whip, it will not come out the way you see here in this video. So I just thought I'd let you guys know right up front. But yeah, that pretty much does it for this tutorial so far. What I'm going to do is just cut these little tassels off, singe them, and burn them up against the whip for a smoother profile. And then I'm just going to roll it, and that'll be it for this video. So hopefully I'll see you guys in part 2.